Good morning. Welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where we come together every week as a people with diverse beliefs and a shared commitment to bring more peace, more love, more justice, and more joy into the world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. I want to say a special welcome to all of our visitors this morning, in person and on Zoom. We are glad you are here with us today. And in particular, I want to welcome members of our partners in these summer consortium services, the two Lexington UU churches, First Parish and Fallen Hill, also the Concord, Lincoln, and Carlisle UU churches. Rather than follow the old New England tradition of shutting down for the summer, we are pooling our efforts and rotating our services from one church to the next. Next Sunday, the consortium service will be back here in Bedford and will be led by our senior minister, Jamie Hinson-Rieger. So by a show of hands, how many people are here today from Carlisle? How about Lincoln? Concord? I think you may outnumber us. Fallen Hill? And First Parish Lexington. What about Bedford? Do we have any Bedfordites here? Visitors who want to stay connected to this church are invited to fill out a blue connection card, which you'll find at the end of the pews. You can give it to one of the ushers during the collection, and we'll add you to our mailing list. On Zoom, a link in the chat will take you to a form you can also fill out as your virtual connection card. While we are not providing childcare this morning, we are always delighted to have little ones here in our sanctuary. And the Reverend Annie has an announcement.
Yes, though it is very last minute for most people considering signing up for a program, I just wanted to let everyone know that our Pathways program kicks off tomorrow. This is a program for kids entering grades 1st through 7th that we're going to be holding here at First Parish in Bedford from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday, exploring bodies, boundaries, and belonging. We'll have fun, we'll have music led by our youth choirs director, and we'll have plenty of engaging activities. So if by any chance you know a kid in that age range who doesn't have plans next week, you can go on our website and find out more information. And with that, I will move us into our chalice lighting. Our chalice lighting words come from Katie Kandarian Morris. Here we have come into this sacred space, quieter now with our readiness, hushed voices, hoping, trusting for so many things, for connection, for communion, for inspiration, for information, for healing, for wholeness, for words, for music, for celebration and consolation. Here we have come into this space, bringing all of who we are. Let us be willing, however we are changed. Our theme for today's worship is about trust, and one thing you can trust is that you will find out inaccuracies in a printed material. Our opening hymn is number 389, not 398, in your cloth-bound or gray hymnal. It is Gathered Here. And this song is actually a round, and we are a robust group, and I think it would be great fun to sing it as a round. So let's sing it all together twice through, and then we can cue one side and the other and do it a couple times as a round. You can remain standing however you are risen in body or in spirit for our unison affirmation. It is it in our order of worship? Yes, it is. Oh, it's on the little fold. I never have to look for it because I know it, but it's important to know where it is. It's on the fold. And it's even on a slide. My goodness. People are on top of it. All right. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad, el espíritu de amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. And you may be seated. So for this part, actually some of you, I said you may be seated, and you very well may, and some of you may wish to rise in body if you want to. But this next part is a practice that I have offered at various times in our congregation, and for some it has caught on and become a regular part of small group ministry meetings. And I thought it would be a nice offering to center us this morning. So this is what I call a body prayer, and you can think of it as a body prayer, a moving meditation, whatever works for you, and it can be done seated or standing, whatever suits you. So it's just 4 postures. And the first one is a posture that I like to think of as gratitude or praise or awe, and it's just putting my arms up. And I just take a moment to think about those things for which I am grateful, those things which make me go, wow. That could be someone in your life, it could be a community, it could be this beautiful earth we live on, whatever it is that just makes you say thank you. Wow. And then the second posture is a posture about humility. It's about recognizing limitation and knowing that we are only human. And what I do is put my hands together and kind of lower my gaze. And so whatever posture works for you, if this works, to just take a moment and consider that we know we are only human, that we can only do so much, that of course we fall short, and that is normal, and that we are held in love despite it all. And then I like to turn my hands out and take a moment to hold in my heart or send energy out to those who need some love and care. Could be individuals you know personally who are struggling, who are ill, who are grieving. It could be places in our country or in the world where there is violence or struggle or injustice. Just sending that care out into the world. And lastly, wrapping that care back in for ourselves, knowing that we too need that love, need that care, need that support. And just taking a moment to breathe in the love that is available to us and giving ourselves that care and love. So now we'll move through those postures twice all together, and I will put the mic down so that I can do them fully and so that we can do it together without the narration. you.
Good morning. My name is Marge Heckman, and I'm a member of the lay pastoral team here at First Parish. And at this time in the service, we invite anyone who would like to come forward and light a candle of joy or concern to do so. And then we will check in with those on Zoom. I will light one last candle for all those joys and concerns that we keep in our hearts.
Another thing I like to do from time to time around here is sing songs that are not in our hymnals. This song is a song that I learned in sort of UU and UU adjacent singing circles, but it is a song that comes from the Jewish tradition. And the lyrics are printed in your order of worship, though they are rather small, I know. So I'm going to also say them out loud. They're pretty simple. Do not walk in front of me, I may not follow. Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and hold my hand, and together we'll be walking in the path of Hashem. Hashem being Hebrew for the name, so pointing towards God, pointing towards that ultimate mystery. So it goes a little like this, and then we can sing it together. So I'll sing a line, and you sing it back to me. We'll do it that way to learn. Do not walk in front of me, I may not follow. Do not walk in front of me, I may not follow. Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and hold my hand. Just walk beside me and hold my hand. And together we'll be walking in the path of Hashem. And together we'll be walking in the path of Hashem. All right, let's put it together, and we'll do it through a few times. Do not walk in front of me, I may not follow. Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and hold my hand. And together we'll be walking in the path of Hashem. Do not walk with me, I may not follow. Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and hold my hand. And together we'll be walking in the path of Hashem. Last time. Do not walk in front of me, I may not follow. Do not walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and hold my hand. And together we'll be walking in the path of Hashem.
When I heard that Annie wanted to do a service about trust, I immediately knew I wanted to be involved. Trust is something I find myself thinking about quite a bit. I write a political blog, The Weekly Sift, that I know some of you read. These days, political blogging is all about trust. The reason so many people go out of their way to find alternative voices and alternative framings of the news is that larger institutions of media have lost their trust. Too often, the institutional voices are simply repeating what powerful people want them to say, or just being outrageous to hold our attention by making us angry or fearful. Now, when you put yourself out there as an alternative voice, the question that always has to be in the back of your mind is, why should anybody trust me? Am I helping my readers to cut through the noise, or am I just more noise? I'm raising these questions today because I think they have a more general application. This era of social media has, in some sense, turned all of us into journalists and pundits. We are all covering and interpreting the world for each other. And so we all may find ourselves asking two simple questions. Who can I trust? And why don't more people trust me? This morning, I'd like to raise a third question. What can I do to become more trustworthy? Here are some rules of thumb I try to keep in mind. To be more trustworthy, I can show my work and tell you where I got the observations I'm claiming as facts. I can make clear the difference between what I know, what I hope, what I fear, and what I'm just guessing at. I can be explicit about my sympathies and biases rather than hide behind a false objectivity. I can admit what I got wrong and recall the times when my predictions did not pan out. At its best, an argument is more than just a contest. It's a process in which people search for truth together. That idea goes back at least as far as Socrates. It's what scientific argument is supposed to be about, and it's the purpose behind the adversarial system in our courts. We can become more trustworthy if we hold that purpose in mind, if we worry less about whether we are winning and more about whether our participation is moving the community in the direction of truth. Now, something fascinating starts to happen when you apply rules like that to the thoughts you put out into the world. You begin to internalize them. How do I really know this thing that I think is true? Is it arising primarily out of hope or fear? Does it reflect some prior bias? Have I fixed or even recognized the mistakes in my past thinking? As those habits of thought internalize, you may notice that the noise inside your mind begins to die down. And perhaps the arguments that you have inside your own head will be more likely to arrive at truth. Now we come to the offering, and there's another mistake in the order of service. We're actually not sharing the plate. We're keeping all of it. In times like this, we draw strength from one another, and we are grateful that we have places and occasions where we can gather. As the morning's offering is collected, I invite you to give as you are able to support the continuing work of this church.
A few months back, I had to end a relationship. It was a parasocial relationship with a podcaster named Wendy. I really liked Wendy. She had a cool Australian accent, and she was the host of the podcast Science Versus, which was a podcast that would put science versus whatever the topic of the day was, such as some trend in recent wellness type or some rumor on the internet, or sometimes just a timely exploration of some, illness that was having an outbreak, things like that. And I found that very useful because I'm someone who generally thinks the scientific method is a good way to know things. Can't know everything that way, but it's helpful in knowing a lot of things. And because there's a lot of things in this world that it's confusing to know what's true. Doug mentioned some of the reasons, and I'll talk about some more of them later, but it is often hard to discern exactly what is true these days when you are encountering information. And so I liked this podcast, but eventually I had to stop listening because of an ad. It was an ad, and it wasn't just an ad that was being run. This was an ad where the host was speaking personally, which I do feel like for some reason I hold those in different categories. And it was an ad for an Amazon AI doctor or something like this. And I just felt like I could not. Because, first of all, Amazon, Bezos, that's a whole moral issue. But second of all, AI doctor did not seem like a very science-backed idea to me. And it just made me think, if that's what she's willing to back for money, then what can I trust about other things she says on this podcast? And I think that this kind of dilemma is something that maybe comes up for a lot of us in different ways. Knowing, well, if this person did that, then what does that mean about some other thing they do or said they would do? And the thing is, I was particularly bummed about, as I mentioned, the science podcast because generally speaking, there is an increasing problem with people not trusting scientific research, not trusting mainstream scientific consensus. I found a study from 2024 on attitudes towards science that was published in the National Library of Medicine, and in a hopeful way, it said that generally speaking, trust in science remains relatively high in the United States. That's good. And they also addressed that there were important changes, and they wrote, "The emerging, more complicated understanding suggests that trust is a function of the relationship between political values, issue-specific scientific knowledge, and the implications for policymaking. When presented with scientific information about a policy that threatens a person's political values, they are likely to express doubts about the scientific facts and lower levels of trust in science as a defense against this value threat. In other words, if people have to choose between believing a scientific study or maintaining their political identity, people will choose their political identity." And part of what makes this situation particularly tricky is that it's actually very easy to find people debunking many different scientific theories with their own studies or experiments. And the truth is that, of course, there are mainstream studies that were once widely accepted that did need to be debunked. And there probably are still some that need to be debunked as well. Science is meant to correct itself over time, and there are definitely situations in which an accepted theory was based on a study that was only done on men, or a study that was only done on white people, or something like that, where the data was skewed and the conclusions were not trustworthy. But often the debunking that causes people to stop believing in things like the efficacy of vaccines or the realities of climate change are more like conspiracy theories wrapped up in sciencey terminology. Or there's always the person who does a study with the participation of one, themselves, and then declares themselves an expert on some new scientifically proven weight loss or wellness trend. But science is not the only area in which trust is degrading. And in fact, trust in our government is much lower, near record lows in this country at the moment. Probably none of us are surprised by that. A study by Navigator Research on why we don't trust our elected officials indicated that 8 in 10 Americans believe that elected officials' focus on enriching themselves and their donors stops them from getting things done. 8 in 10. And that included Democrats, independents, and Republicans, though it was more likely for Democrats to believe that and slightly less likely for Republicans. It was still high in all across the political spectrum. And that was not the only thing that gave people pause about trusting their elected officials. Other very highly rated, like at least 3/4 of people responding agreed with these statements, were things like they are unwilling to reach across the aisle, they are out of touch and don't understand the struggles that people face, they are unwilling to stand up to the most extreme members of their own party, and they are working for the corporations and not the people. These kind of sentiments created real barriers and are creating real barriers to trust. And I certainly don't blame anyone for feeling that way, and I feel a lot of those same ways myself. But despite seeming to be in relative agreement that we cannot trust our elected officials, Americans are not necessarily in agreement about a lot of other things. Polarization has decreased our trust in other people. There's a lot of misinformation, conspiracies, AI-generated content on the internet. And as Doug mentioned, there's also the fact that increasingly people are putting out their hot takes, not based on what they actually believe or what is nuanced and true, but just based on what will get a lot of attention by pissing people off. One of the online memes, repeated phrases that reflects this culture of mistrust is source, trust me, bro. And you can often see this comment appended to social media posts that are putting forth politically contentious assertions. Whether the person is saying studies have shown, or according to the UN, or just stating something with no credentialing, unless there is a link shared to an actual study or a UN report, people will understandably begin to ask for the source. And if one is not forthcoming, people will often mock the poster by implying the source of their information is just trust me, bro. And there are indeed many influencers and other social media personalities out there who build up huge followings based solely on just trust me, bro, sometimes coupled with the encouragement to do your own research, with the implication that if you do your own research and don't trust those nefarious experts, you'll agree with them. But the truth is, I don't want to do my own research. I want to be able to believe experts. I want scientists to do the studies and do the science. And I want journalists to do the journalism and the digging and share accurate information. I want to feel like sources can be depended on. And that makes sense. Trust is a very basic need for humans. In Erik Erikson's popular theory of development, it's the very first stage in human development. He posits that when we are babies, we are in the stage of trust versus mistrust. We are trying to figure out if this world is trustworthy. And his theory says that if caregivers are attentive enough and basically meet our needs, and we're mostly in safe environments, we will form trust, and we will think that this world is trustworthy. But if caregivers do not meet needs, or are very inconsistent, or circumstances are not safe, we will learn that the world is not to be trusted. Now, I feel fortunate because I got to develop trust in my early years, and in fact, I think I grew up with a lot of trust in the world. When I was young, I trusted my parents, I trusted my Unitarian Universalist church, I trusted my teachers, I trusted PBS, all the basics. But kidding aside, I do remember how disorienting it was for me when I started to learn more about the complexity of the world as a young adult, when things that I used to think were fairly simple turned out to be complicated. I remember in undergrad when I started learning about bias and how even things I thought were just objective truth had biases in them, and the ways that white supremacy and patriarchy are woven into so much of our society. I remember how hopeful and trusting I was in Obama. I've talked about that before from this pulpit. I went so hard for Obama when I was in college, and I remember just the slow crumbling of trust that I felt, not just because of choices he made, for example, around deportations, but also because of things he just couldn't get done despite his best efforts. And then I remember when I was working at the Unitarian Universalist Association, and I realized that our beloved faith tradition and these institutions were also imperfect and also had imperfect humans working at them and running them and leading them, that we were not a special set-aside group that could always be trusted. And so what does it look like? What does it really look like to trust? Well, in exploring the concept of trust with my partner, I learned about a framework they'd encountered about 4 components of trust. And so I thought I would Google that and look into it. And actually what I found is a lot of people believe there are 4 components to trust, and almost everybody agrees that all the 4 components start with the letter C. However, they don't agree on what all the words are, so I thought that was very interesting. The 2 words that showed up on every list was consistency and competence. Consistency and competence. And that makes a lot of sense on a very practical level. Consistency amounts to saying yes to the question, can I predict this person or entity's behavior? If someone or some institution has a predictable pattern of behavior, it is much easier to establish trust. Variation is normal, but if the variation is extreme or random, then trust becomes very difficult. And then competence, of course, is about whether the person or this entity can actually do the thing, whatever the thing is that is expected or agreed to. So if I told you I would repair your car or knit you a sweater, you should not trust me. I cannot do those things. I do not have any skills in mechanics or in knitting. But if I told you I'd plan a memorial service or make you a pie, then yes, I can do those things and I have those skills. Feel free to trust away. But after those sort of practical things, we get into somewhat squishier concepts, and this is where the variation comes into play. So the different words that are on the list include character, connection, compassion, communication, caring, and commitment. So it was sort of a you pick 2 out of that list for each different group. And these are about other questions. These are about, will you do the right thing? Do you care about me? Do you care about the same things I care about? Will you let me know what's going on? And these are really important components to trust because nobody is going to be completely consistent and competent at everything, and we need those other aspects to help hold the trust in place. Plus, someone could also very consistently and competently do terrible things, and we probably wouldn't say we trust that person even though they were consistent and competent. And I think it's these aspects, these character, compassion, communication type aspects that can make trust really, really hard these days. Too often it is true that people do care more about things like profit or image and not enough about other humans. Too often it is true that there isn't enough communication or enough clear communication or enough communication on the right timeline, and that really can decrease trust. And I think that Doug's advice that he gave earlier is really centered on correcting in these areas. Being transparent, that's about communication, explaining your sources, talking about when you got something wrong. That's communication and character, as well as thinking about the larger impact more than winning. That's also about character and care. So if trust is made up of all these components, we could say, well, trust needs a lot of ingredients to make it work, and so trust is really hard to come by and really easy to lose. But I think I'd rather see it more as trust is nuanced. Trust is multifaceted. I certainly have had experiences where other people saw trust as a zero-sum game. If something someone did caused them to lose trust, it was like, now I don't trust that person, period. End of story. I'm not going to trust them ever again. Not going to trust them in some other dimension. Just, we're done. And I think that people tend to move in that direction when they've had experiences of betrayal, maybe not gotten that sense of trust in early childhood, or just maybe had repeated experiences where their trust was violated until it's very hard to hold the trust. And I think that is a real shame, because the truth is that trust is a spectrum. Trust is not one thing, and it wouldn't really make sense to trust one person for everything, right? I'm sure we all have friends that maybe we can really rely on to be a good listener and really hear us out, but maybe they're not going to be the most practically useful or useful in a crisis. And we might also have friends who are definitely going to show up for us. They're going to bring the ride or give us, the casserole, but maybe they're not going to be the best listener, right? And then there's ourselves. I find that I certainly am someone who cannot trust myself on every aspect of life. In fact, I will do a little bit of transparency here. I think that's one of my strongest trust suits. Consistency, I'm always working on that one, but communication, I try to really stay strong. Earlier, before the service, Doug was like, is this a share the plate? And I was like, no, it's not share the plate, because nobody approached me about share the plate. But while he was speaking, I realized it is share the plate, because the whole summer is the same offering, and it's all share the plate. It's not a specific thing. And so, anyway, I gave him false information, which he gave to you through no fault of his own. But I would like to correct that information, except I do not know what the organization is off the top of my head, because my memory is very bad. Where are we giving this summer's offering to? Does anyone know? Luce. It's to Luce. If you are not familiar with Luce, it is an immigration network all over Massachusetts. They run an ICE Watch hotline. They have hubs that do mutual aid for people who are facing deportation, and they do a lot of good work. And we're giving them our offering, and we are sharing it. So that's a very good thing. But anyway, back to working on trust. Doug had some really good advice about how we can be more trustworthy, and that's a very important piece of the puzzle. And I think that one of the best things we can do is exactly what Doug was saying, work on our communication, our transparency, so that when we do inevitably make mistakes, because we are human beings, then we can rely more on some of the care, connection, those more squishy aspects of trust, that people will still be able to trust us in the future. But what about how we can be more trusting, or perhaps it's better to say the right amount of trusting? Because I think it's very possible to err in either direction when it comes to trust. I think sometimes we trust too much, either in sort of a naive way or in that sort of this is my ideology and I will not take in any information that contradicts it way. And then it's also possible to be too cynical, too skeptical, both in an interpersonal way where we're not, opening ourselves up to real connection, but also in sort of a societal way where we don't trust any institutions and we don't trust any leaders. And it's really hard to make society work if that's the case. So I think we can do two practices that are maybe in dynamic tension. One where we trust a little less and one where we trust a little more. The first practice is just trying to do some vetting about the things that we trust. That can be as simple as doing a search before you share something on the internet. I know it is very easy to share things on the internet that are not, in fact, true. I've done it. I bet you've done it. But I always try, now more than ever, to actually check before I share anything to make sure that it's accurate, or at least as best I can tell. I mean, we can't, you can go really far down a rabbit hole with that, but, a basic level of vetting. But that can also look like vetting in other ways. It could be vetting with yourself. Do I have the capacity to do this thing I'm about to say I'm going to do? Or does it seem like the other person has the actual ability to do the thing I'm expecting them to do? Things where we check in a little bit with ourselves, with our gut, and try to vet a little before we trust. And try to remember that trust is not a one and done. It can be, oh yeah, I do trust this person to do X, Y, Z, but not A, B, C. Another thing we can do that helps us sort of vet our own mentality is to take in media that comes from other political and cultural positions to challenge our mentality. I only do this sometimes. I don't do it all the time, but I do find that it's useful in a variety of ways. And oftentimes it leaves my convictions intact, but it helps me at least understand where other people are coming from, even if it doesn't change my mind, and it helps me stay a little more agile, a little more open. And then in the direction of trusting more. We can practice vulnerable trust when the stakes are low enough, right? So, for example, we can delegate that task, even though we're not sure that person's going to do it that well, and actually we know we'd do a better job. But if the stakes aren't that high, if it's not a really make or break thing, delegate it and see how it goes, right? Or maybe it's on an interpersonal level. Maybe we're thinking, gosh, I want to maybe take a risk and share some feedback with someone that might make our relationship closer and help me trust them more, but gosh, I don't know how they're going to react. And as long as you don't think a negative reaction would totally destroy you, give it a try. Extend some trust and see what happens. Because the more we trust people, the more trustworthy they are likely to become, unless they truly have nefarious intentions. You can, try letting your kid make dinner as long as there's backup frozen pizza in the freezer. Things like this. Trust is absolutely foundational to the human experience. It's vitally necessary for our society to function. And the more trust we can build right now, the better. And despite all we are up against, and we are up against a lot, I believe in us. I believe in us, those of us gathered in this worship experience, but I also mean I believe in us humanity. Us messy, complicated, inconsistent, confusing humans who make so many mistakes. I really love us, and I want us to thrive, all of us. And I think with some intention and practice, we can all do our part to add a little more trust to this world. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn. We're just going to sing the first and last verses of our closing hymn. It's We Laugh, We Cry, number 354. Our closing words are by Carrie Kopnick. I trust that my heart knows the way. I trust my will to hold. I trust that I am to go. I trust that this is the way. I trust that the obstacles will be scalable. I trust myself. I trust spirit, the trees, the oceans, the sky, and the stars. I trust the way. And with that, we will extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts always.